Well, see, what Moffat did instead was to jump an indeterminate length of time between every time we see Clara. One day she's a nanny, one day she's an ice cream lady, one time she's a bus driver, she's a astronaut. I don't know.
Although
she got a lot of jobs, is what I'm saying.
They could be different splinters of Clara, so it might legitimately be that they are just different Claras.
We never realized that she was dying at the end of every week.
Yes.
I guess she didn't have to die, but like in Asylum, I believe she died at the end.
She died in Asylum, and she died when she was that Victorian nanny.
Yeah. That'd be funny if after every time we see her, like in that one episode where they show her through all the doctors, like if just off screen she dies, like, 10 seconds
I think that
later.
would have been a brilliant concept. You wouldn't have to
Just
see her
falls off
dying
a
every time,
railing.
because that would get repetitive. They could do that as, they were releasing little what they called them something dreadful, like mini-sodes. You could go onto the BBC website to watch a mini-sode of Clara dying if you really wanted to. But the gimmick would be every week, you don't know what she's going to be. This week.
And she's been doing it for 3 years.
Yeah.
No, I mean, really,
or
she
longer.
just went from nanny to.
I love it. It's basically like Quantum Leap, but the other way around.
Oh,
where
yes.
It's rather than your lead character leaping into a new situation, it's just that one of your leads has been in that situation for her whole life. This week, Clara's a train driver.
That's so wild.
And she could be in the right position for whatever the story needed.
Okay, wait. The most recent episode, Joy to the World, I think the closest brush with death in that one is maybe on the train when he throws the thing.
Yeah.
Like maybe the rope is starting to go while he's holding it. She like holds the back end or something. I don't know.
Yeah. This week, Clara's climbing Everest.
Moffat, if it was Moffat, he'd have her get there fird before Tenzin Norgay and whatnot.
That would be your pre-credits thing would be the kind of historical characters getting to the summit, and then she'd be there in a little tent and with her arms folded going, "What took you so long?"
Yes.
Cue credits.
Now, that's a series I would watch.
I'd watch that more than I would watch any of the episodes with Clara.
She could wear red really well, though. I will.
Oh yeah, I think the problem with Clara is she was there for a fairly gimmicky reason, and they got that they did the Clara arc by the Day of the Doctor. After which point, there was no reason for her to be there, and she certainly did one season too many. I just think the Clara 12th Doctor dynamic is kind of unpleasant, and what a refreshing thing it was to get Bill. If we could have had 2 seasons with her, that would have made me very happy.
Yeah, that last season with Clara is or those last 2, I guess, are pretty tense.
It's the Tegan thing, isn't it? It's like if you don't like this person, you don't want to be there. What are you doing here?
Oh, she's a real Doctor Who fan that likes it for a while and then hates it. In those times when the Doctor wasn't coming around, she was just talking shit about him to all her friends for like years. She plays old videotapes of when he was cool.
Yeah. Well, one of them does. One Clara is doing that.
Welcome back to The Great and Secret Knowledge. I'm Jeff. Oh, it's a speculative fiction podcast. And to do it with me today is your friend and mine, the incomparable James Lark. Hello, James.
Hello, Jeff. Lovely to talk to you. And it's been a
Hell
little while.
yes. It has. Yeah, we've had holidays and
We've had a whole
maybe not
festive
holidays.
season.
We've had a ton of stuff going on.
Mine was less of a holiday, I have to say, but yes.
Yeah.
Festivities and mince pies.
How's your winter weather going?
Oh, well, in line with the new and unpredictable climate of this planet, it's pretty hard to nail it down. We've had some proper winter, and just when you think it's getting into its stride, we've had a bit of summer as well. So it's been quite wet. Although today has been gloriously sunny and crisp and clear. So I've been out for a long walk and enjoying the what looks set to be a very brief period of winter before, who knows, maybe we go back to autumn for a little while. Sorry, you don't call it autumn, do you?
Sometimes we call it fall. Sometimes we call it autumn. I think it's like based on vibes.
Autumn is in the parlance, is it? It's understood.
It feels like an East Coast thing, but I hear people say it out here sometimes. Yeah, it just depends.
We don't really talk about the fool here. If you belong to a particularly poncy educational establishment, you call it Michaelmas.
My God, that's wonderful. Michaelmas. That's the kind of word I'd put in a sci-fi story and then take it out because it seems odd. Like, that's too alien. All right. Chapter 15, Amulet of Samarkand. Last we were together, Nathaniel, his birth name is discovered by Bartimaeus. So he's in the shit.
We've reached a proper kind of shit hitting the fan, or the shit is heading towards the fan, and it feels like everything's being lined up for the fan to be turned on, maybe. And we should say to listeners that there's a lot going on in these. We're doing 4 chapters.
Oh
no, 5 chapters. We're doing five chapters. Yeah, that's me in maths. If you start at 15 and go up to 19, that's
yeah. Chapter 15. Let's see. The pigeon flies off. Nathaniel closes his window, and then he crumples against the wall. And he, for almost an hour, he remained slumped against the wall, staring at nothing. I've had moments like that.
Well, I was thinking it's a really insightful way of describing both the strain that the magical aspect of what he's doing has put him under, because he's dealing with some pretty big stuff, which is considered way beyond his ability and his age. And also the stress of the situation. He's knowingly stepped into a outside his comforts, what he thinks he can handle, but basically it's way outside his ability to process what's going on emotionally and in terms of the stuff he's opened himself up to. And the fact that the Bartimaeus has learned his name, that's a final gutting thing to find out. And I like that Jonathan Stroud takes a moment to show that this is still actually just a young boy dealing with an unimaginable amount of pressure.
One might say too much.
It feels like he's so out of his depth now, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's at once super capable and ahead of his cohort, like magically, we think, but playing with the biggest stakes and the most fire, at least for a 12-year-old. Let's see. He thinks he'll be fine once he casts the binding spell on the tin. He's shaking like crazy, so he does his best to pull himself together. And apparently the stimulating compass that he shot at Bartimaeus, when it bounced back on him...
The Ginny knew his birth name. It knew his birth name. Bartimaeus of Uruk, Sakar al-Jinni of Alarish. He had allowed it to uncover his name. Mrs. Underwood had spoken, and the Jinni had heard, and in that moment the cardinal rule had been broken. And now Nathaniel was compromised, perhaps forever.
Perhaps forever.
It's the forever bit that's so troubling here, isn't it? He wants to be a magician. He aspires to be the greatest of magicians, and he's made a rookie error which could compromise his entire career.
Oh, that's scary stuff.
We've all been there.
Yeah, I don't relate to that at all. I say, looking over my shoulder for my nemesis. What were you going to say?
Well, I was trying to think of a kind of equivalent, like if a young person like does something stupid or writes something stupid on the internet, or, you know, their nudes get leaked, the kind of thing that teens have to deal with that I didn't have to deal with when I was a teenager. Thank goodness. And it must put people in a situation where they think, well, this is ruined the rest of my life. I think there are so many things now that are forever. So many situations where you can feel that your mistakes are going to follow you around until the day you die.
Yeah, that is one of the unforeseen benefits of the internet. Is that doing things that are hurtful or dangerous or unethical or whatever will stick with you. And all that means is that if you're in a group that doesn't like that thing, you're kind of not in that group anymore. It's why so many liberals, when they get caught doing something terrible, veer to the right.
Yeah.
Because like they've got their arms open over there.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't care about
that
stuff anymore.
It's almost a badge of honor.
Mm. Yuck. All right. But anyway, when you're a kid, everything feels like it'll be forever anyway. And then you have the internet on top of that, and it's like, whew.
Oh, yeah. No, and I certainly remember as a child, there were things that felt like, well, that's my entire life ruined. But I just feel like it's maybe more of a genuine worry for this generation, where so many things are just recorded for forever, like literally. You have to be so careful. It's one of the things we try and educate our pupils about. You know, don't just put your first thoughts down on the internet, because the internet is forever. Someone's going to find it.
Yes. And I didn't grow up learning that, whereas some kids might be trained from a young age now to be more careful. Like James Gunn. Those tweets are never really going away. You know what I mean?
I know, but I think it's a shame because... Shame, that's such a weak way of putting it. Kids make mistakes. And indeed, and when I say kids, like the mistakes I made in my 20s, I would hate to think that there was a permanent record of those things. There is, to some extent, because I knew people and people presumably remember things. But I feel like people evolve, and ideally, I mean, it's not always the case, but people in the best case scenario have the chance to improve, and we shouldn't be judged on how we lived when we were at primary school, or as teenagers, or in our 20s when we were still discovering how the world works. The only way that you can discover and become a better version of yourself to some extent is to make mistakes. And
yes,
and there are small mistakes, which is most mistakes, and there are huge mistakes, and even people who make massive, whacking great, huge mistakes, and those are the ones that obviously do get remembered. I'd like to think can have a chance to come back from that, but I feel like there's something very unforgiving about a thing etched in. It's like a memorial to a stupid thing you said or a stupid thing you thought, and it doesn't age like you. It doesn't evolve, and it's there forever, and it sort of starts to symbolize how you are as well as how you were.
Sometimes I think about time travel and I'm like, if I had to do it selfishly, would I go back and undo that terrible mistake? Or did that, was that a foundational event for my character and ethics going forward? I feel like it made me a better person. That sounds awful. I don't know.
No,
It was
no, I
important,
agree with what you're
fundamental
saying.
anyway.
Fundamental. Of course. I mean, we all have regrets, but if you don't have some regrets, and I'm terrified of people who don't have regrets. Going back to politics again, but what's terrifying about them is they don't seem to have learned from any of their mistakes. A regret is a sign that you have a conscience and that you know that you can do better. A regret is a sign that you aspire to be a better person. Regrets are good things, even if they are painful.
Deal. No regrets.
This has become very
yes,
philosophical.
We're one quote in, and wow, this is great. All right, so he's really panicking. It's the cardinal rule: you can't let anyone know your real name. There's basically a sword of Damocles over his head for the rest of his life, as we talked about. He recalls some famous case studies. There was a guy named Werner of Prague who got sucked into a whirlwind and swirled about until his body parts rained down on the town.
Children's fiction, eh?
Love it. So he starts sobbing, then he pulls himself together. He's kind of thinking about the spell of indefinite confinement, and then once that's done, he goes to bed. Mrs. Underwood is worried about him, so she tells her husband. Arthur doesn't care. He just wants his mango chutney. Is that stuff good? I've never had it.
Have you not?
I think we call chutney marmalade over here.
Oh.
It's usually a homemade thing.
I mean, marmalade is a very different thing to chutney. In the UK, at any rate, marmalade is usually an orange-based, but certainly kind of a citrus fruit-based preserve, which in particular is associated with breakfast and toast.
Yes.
And a good marmalade spread on a piece of toast is one of life's great pleasures. Whereas mango chutney, I would say a chutney generally, I would think, I don't know. Now I'm doubting myself.
Isn't it kind of jelly-like?
Well, so is marmalade. Marmalade is kind of. I mean, marmalade is basically a jam.
Yeah.
But it's slightly more savory than a jam. A chutney, I think, is maybe slightly lumpier, but it depends on the chutney. But a mango chutney is quite sweet, ironically, because it tends to be used with savory dishes. So, in particular, you would associate mango chutney with a curry. If you go for an Indian curry in the UK, which is not a particularly authentic Indian experience, but it's the curry as it has evolved as a UK dish, you quite often start off with a round of poppadoms, and you have your lime pickle, which some people hate, but I think is wonderful, and you have your mango chutney, and the two balance each other up perfectly because the lime pickle is very bitter and the mango chutney is very sweet, so you get kind of sweet and sour thing, and usually some kind of yogurty stuff and some sliced onions as well, which I'm less keen on. But mango chutney on a poppadom is a great thing. Yeah, so I'm with Mr. Underwood here. I wouldn't, if mango chutney was...
If we're running out, ma'am, we don't have anything to talk about.
Don't bother me with this young apprentice until you've sorted out the mango chutney situation.
Oh, poor Mrs. Underwood. So he says the boy's just worried about his naming and summoning his first demon. He tells her to tell Nathaniel to meet him in an hour. And after that, Underwood has to talk to his head of security, or I guess he's the chief of police, Duval, about the thefts.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Underwood tries to cheer Nathaniel up. She says he's lucky that he gets to pick his name because commoners aren't allowed to. And Nathaniel says he'd like to go out for a bit.
He's got some stuff to deal with, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, the Underwoods are so it's the tragedy here is that he's being so brilliant. He's such a talented magician. He's doing something so astonishing. They can't even begin to get their heads around the what he's actually dealing with.
Oh, yes. They don't see what he's going through. It's, yeah. And that's so common in a lot of families, or all families at some point, probably eventually.
And I think it's also it's part of the hero's journey, isn't it? So he's
They won't take me to Tachi Station for power converters, you know? Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen.
exactly the same. Exactly that. Exactly that. And there is there's a horrible fact of storytelling that Luke Skywalker has to have his relatives horribly murdered before he can begin his journey.
Poor Luke. Oh, spoiler alert. Something like that might happen later.
Oh yeah, well, sorry, yeah, maybe a possibility. But I think okay, so without giving too much away, there are a couple of things being done here rather cleverly. One is to already isolate Nathaniel and to make it clear that he's on. I mean, there's no way he can really now confide in his master, even if that was going to be a useful thing to do, which it probably isn't. He's treading a lone path and a dangerous path. The next thing that's important is that Underwood is not only unaware, he's unsympathetic and unempathetic and contemptible in his response. That's, I think, important for some of the things up ahead for Mr. Underwood. But equally important is the fact that Mrs. Underwood is absolutely lovely and clearly is devoted to Nathaniel and the one person in his life who really seems to care for him, who he has left.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my dad growing up. You could count on him. But at the same time, he couldn't protect me from, other situations, which clearly is the case here.
Yeah.
She just puts up with her abusive husband. Is he abusive? He's pretty abusive. Mango chutney
It's
and whatnot.
I would say he would be in my school a safeguarding concern.
That's a good language for that. So she tells him the naming is in an hour, which isn't enough time to do a spell. And I wanted to quote this nice thing she says. "It's a big day for you, Nathaniel. When I see you again, you'll be someone else. This will probably be the last time I call you by your old name. I suppose I shall have to start forgetting it now." Why couldn't you have started forgetting it this morning, he thought. A small, malicious part of him wished to blame her for her careless affection, but he knew that this was totally unjust. It was his fault the demon had been on hand to hear her. Safe, secret, strong. He was none of these things now. He took a gulp of tea and burned his mouth. Whew. Growing up is hard to do.
Yeah.
Nathaniel goes into the library with Lowe's nominative almanac. Underwood praises him for wearing a jacket. That's cute. The book was delivered from... Oh, go ahead.
This whole scene, it's kind of painful, but it is funny. The choosing of the name and the way they're coming from this from completely different perspectives, and Nathaniel wants to choose the name of a great magician, and Underwood's like, you can't have that because he's a great magician. No, you need something far more humble, and suggests some really shit names.
Yeah, he says there are some names that are too great and too recent to touch. And Nate, if he's too arrogant, it'll draw unwanted attention, which would detract from his revenge fantasy.
And his first thought is Gladstone, of course.
Oh, of course, yeah. So I wanted to mention that the book was delivered from someone named Jarodlov. I was thinking maybe that's a book printer. Jaroslav, maybe.
I hadn't really thought about that. It had been delivered by Jaroslavs only the day before. This is so it's clearly a book of which there are limited copies then, and it has to be ordered as you might order something from the British Library, or I don't know.
Right.
I don't know that we have anything that would necessarily deliver a an important
They
tome.
probably get a contract from the government because he's a minister, right? He's a
Yeah,
lesser
yeah.
minister.
I'm just trying to think if there's a real world version. I guess probably ministers that there are.
Or medical journals.
Yeah,
It is a big ass reference book, though.
but to be able to be in a position where a reference book is delivered to your house, there can't be many people in that position, can there?
Well, this is modern day. They have the postal service, right?
Hmm.
And couriers inside a city. That's not so
Yeah,
strange.
yeah. I'm just thinking. It's not a book. It's not a book he's ordered. It's not coming from his local bookshop, is it?
That's right. It's printed on demand. Yeah.
Or is Jaroslav's a very posh bookshop, and they do like you say, print it on demand, and he's ordered it because I guess he's not needed a copy before. It's his first apprentice.
Yeah, I mean, why would anybody? Yeah, of course. Now, I did some math, and this confused me a little bit. So this is the 395th. If they come out every year, and he says he chose his from the 350th, that's 45 years ago. He would have been 12 at the time. Arthur Underwood is only 57 years old.
Yeah, that works, doesn't it? Are you picturing him as much older?
I had him with a long white beard. I don't know. I guess I was not accurately depicting him in my head.
You know, some 57-year-olds can look a lot older than 57 if they don't look after themselves, eat too much mango chutney, that kind of thing.
And Steve Martin's hair went white pretty early.
When he was about 13, yeah.
Yeah, so it could be like that.
I mean, the benefit of that is, of course, Steve. You look at Steve Martin now, and you're like, well, you've not changed since the 80s.
That's right. Yes. Oh man, I love that show he's on now.
That's great, isn't it? Not Only Murders. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm revising my view then on Jaroslav's. I think it's a book like we have a thing called Who's Who. Do you get that in America?
My mom got it once for some reason. It's normally at the library.
I mean, it's only library. Like, no, why would anyone buy Who's Who? But it's like a list of people who are who, and of course, every year a new one comes out because the list of people who are somebody changes. And I don't know why. I mean, why you'd want a load of back copies of Who's Who, but it must be like that, or the Guinness Book of Records or something.
Oh yes, totally. I like that.
Or an almanac. I guess it's an almanac, isn't it? So it's a little bit like we again. This is probably a UK reference, but there's a thing called Wisden's Cricketing Almanac, and for anyone who follows cricket, that's a. I don't know what I mean. I don't understand cricket, so to me, it's a very thick volume of just like numbers, like how many runs certain cricketers have done. I can't imagine anything less interesting. But then I've got books on my shelf listing, episode serial numbers for Doctor Who, and so who am I to talk?
Yeah, oh, that's fun. We had the World Book Encyclopedia.
Oh yeah,
and for a while we were subscribed and getting the yearly update. Those were kind of fun. They were usually kind of short back then. They'd probably be enormous now. There's so much going on. Let's see. I thought Nathaniel would choose his own name, but Arthur is dead set on this old boring one. Oh, Arthur is like, you got to keep your head down or they'll come after you. I'm thinking like, what? Somebody's just going to throw you a fireball from behind a bush or something if they think you're too formidable.
That's him though, isn't it? Like Underwood has got where he is by being basically mediocre.
Mediocre, yeah. Because, yeah, it is scary to challenge convention and to be ambitious. Like in Australia, I hear there's kind of a like, don't get too big for your britches or somebody will knock you down. I don't know, physically, but emotionally. Let's see. Underwood folds up the paper of his new name and puts it in an envelope to be sent to the ministry.
Well, John, he said, it is done. I shall get that stamped at the ministry directly, and you will then officially exist. However, don't go getting above yourself. You still know almost nothing, as you will see when you attempt to summon the Natterjack Impling tomorrow. Still, the first stage of your education is completed, thanks to me.
Oh, God.
What a dick.
Yeah, I wrote this guy is such a dork. Totally missing what's right under his nose. I mean, to think that he's responsible for Nathaniel's, I don't know. I guess he doesn't even know the extent of it.
I'm going to use this line with my pupils at school. Yeah. Now, boys, the first stage of your education is completed, thanks to me.
Congratulations. Oh, my. So now he's allowed to wear his lenses, of which he's already wearing. I don't know if I got the right preposition there, but yeah, he's already wearing them. And Underworld predicts he'll become a lesser minister, just like himself. That's really... A lot of times a parent will have like high hopes for you, and it can be a little daunting. But to have just the same hopes, that's pretty sad.
Is that the nature of apprenticeship, though?
Yeah, you don't want them to shine too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. We get a setup for the next big event. Essentially, like a State of the Union address. That's what we'd call it here. But it's the Prime Minister talking to all his ministers.
Yeah.
Or his whatever
we might
called,
call
Parliament.
it the state opening of Parliament would be the annual event here that it kind of corresponds to.
Okay. And that's usually the same time of year here. Does it move around over there?
It's the start of it's September-ish, I think. Gosh, I hope that's right. I went. I've had an official pass for it was, because I work for an institution which is opposite Parliament, and we were all virtually kind of required, in fact, to stand and watch the Queen go past in her carriage.
Oh my!
And so I got this official, formal invitation to my pass to stand, and I put this on the internet, sort of proudly. Look at what's become of me. Invites to the state of, and someone points out, yeah, James, it says your invite to attend the state opening of Parliament area, the pavement. So I was
That's a very important stretch of road right there.
Yeah, I was very much just on the pavement, though.
So I believe there are crowds outside of Parliament somewhere in these chapters.
I think, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It seems to be kind of a similar thing where the actual guests kind of drive past and
are
admired
so the apprentices and spouses are also invited. It's kind of cute. Nathaniel's super excited to see the Prime Minister. I mean, like, he never goes outside, and he hears about this guy a lot, probably, so it'd be like going out to see a movie for the first time or something. After this, Nathaniel steals 5 pounds from the change jar, and he heads out with his tobacco tin. He catches a bus, and this seems to be his first exposure to the common masses. Magicians were not known for catching public transport. He sat on the back seat as far away from the other passengers as possible, watching them get on and off out of the corner of his eye. Men, women, old, young, youths dressed in drab colors, girls with flashes of jewelry at their throats. They bickered, laughed, or sat quietly, read newspapers, books, and glossy magazines. Human, yes, but it was easy to see they had no power. To Nathaniel, whose experience of people was very limited, this made them oddly two-dimensional. Their conversations seemed about nothing. The books they read looked trivial. Aside from feeling that most of them were faintly vulgar, he could make nothing of them. This was confronting for me. My parents did a decent job of trying to expose us to like how folks of lesser means lived or whatever, but it was still kind of an event. Like when we were visiting someone in a trailer park or like going to a function or whatever in the like inner city or having a meal, you know. Now my parents weren't Arthur Underwood. I don't know what he tells him about the common people, but we have heard him like parrot this nonsense about the commoners. Oh, and we see in the next few chapters Arthur saying some real messed up stuff about commoners.
It's quite an evocative description for anyone who has lived and travelled on public transport in London as well, because London buses are, I mean, the bus system is phenomenal, and London transport is a minor miracle, but there's something quite bleak about being on a bus at night in particular, where, you know, the buses are lit up by this kind of harsh lighting. No one looks great when they're traveling on a bus. And particularly in the evening, you'll see people who are a bit worse for wear or possibly kind of dolled up, and, you know, people make different fashion decisions, and it is kind of like a very public way to kind of display whatever you're kind of going out in.
To peacock a little bit.
And as it say, they'll be reading newspapers, books, glossy magazines. And it's this mixing pot, but this brightly lit, unattractive venue. And yet outside, you'll be driving past these grand buildings, you know, very tastefully floodlit. So somewhere like Westminster, you're driving through this very grand setting in what feels like a very, for want of a better word, common situation, and you do get this sense of divide between where the thing that you're part of, the common public transport, and these grand venues in which smartly dressed people who only ever travel around in smart cars with blacked out windows work.
Yeah, there was a certain age at which I realized that I was still kind of a snob, and it was confronting. I had to be like to remind myself that I had a certain upbringing, certain educational standard or whatever, and I need to not think like Nathaniel. But it took longer than I'm like, you know, I'm a little embarrassed that it took like until I was a little bit older to get over that. I hope Nathaniel kind of joins forces with the commoners and finds solidarity.
But he's been brought up to be a snob, hasn't he? If you're told that you're superior, that stuff sticks. Again, I speak with a degree of experience.
Quit telling your kids they're special. They're a menace.
I don't tell them they're special.
I'm talking to their parents, their hypothetical parents. So they get to Blackfriars Bridge. He's super excited to be this close to Parliament. He bags up the tin with a brick and pitches it over the side into the river. And, have you ever been to Blackfriars? Of course you've been to Blackfriars Bridge. You said you live or you work over there somewhere.
Oh, well, I live very near to Blackfriars Bridge. It's not one of the best bridges in London, but it's perfectly fine.
It's a mid bridge.
It's a mid bridge. There are a lot of bridges in London, and Blackfriars is a bit overshadowed by Blackfriars Station, I would say.
That's the more notable landmark. So on his way home, he thinks about feeling safe, and he's very exhausted.
It feels like a relief that he's got that that tin with the spell in the Thames, doesn't it?
Yeah, now at least Bartimaeus will be disinclined to sell him out. Chapter 16, we're back to Bartimaeus. Why don't you give us this beautiful Bartimaeus quote?
When I set out from the boy's attic window, my head was so full of competing plans and complex stratagems that I didn't look where I was going and flew straight into a chimney. Something symbolic in that. It's what fake freedom does for you.
God, fake freedom. Ouch. I feel like that's kind of like work for an artist, at least. That's my experience, is that, you get a vacation, or like you work extra and you get some extra money that you can spend on your art or your hobby. It's like, woo, I'm flying, I'm going to do all this stuff. And it's like, but I'm also really tired. I might sleep extra this week.
And I better get started on this other job anyway.
Immediately. Oh, I have so many episodes to edit. So he wishes he could fly away and leave the city behind. But he can't, or else Nathaniel will bind him to the tin. He has a month to do the job, but he's got this thing hanging over him. So he just wants to get on with what he was ordered to do. He figures Nathaniel's tired and needs rest, as does he himself. He's obligated. It's the only way to stay sort of free. Freedom is an illusion. It always comes with a price. He decides to park outside Lovelace's place and see who comes in and out, perhaps find someone who knew about whoever had the amulet in the recent past. He perches on a house across the way and he spies. He notices in Lovelace's yard a lot of trees have been removed and several tall, thin, red spirit creatures are there. He stays on the gutter for 3 days. There's search spears searching around the city. A sexy pigeon drops by and tries to get some.
Hang on. You say a sexy pigeon.
How about just a pigeon with a normal sex drive?
I wasn't getting sexy from it. I mean, I was getting distinctly unsexy. Up, Oh, yeah. It describes as a small, well-presented pigeon with a distinctly interested tilt of the head. But beyond that, unless you're particularly into pigeons, I'm not sure you're going to necessarily find it sexy.
How about an amorous
pigeon? Amorous pigeon. Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay.
And it does indeed.
Let the record reflect that is an amorous pigeon and not a sexy pigeon.
The minutes have been adjusted.
Oh, man, this happens too often. I'm shipping pigeons now. All right. There's search spheres going all over the place, and a green imp pops through the force field holding 2 letters. And this is at that moment.
Do you want me to read this one?
I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
At that moment, a purring coo sounded directly in my ear. I half turned my head and looked directly into the beak of that benighted she-pigeon. With devious feminine cunning, she'd seized the opportunity to snuggle right up close. My response was eloquent and brief. She got a wingtip in the eye and a kick in the plumage. And with that, I was airborne, following the imp.
Well done, Bartimaeus. That's not really how we handle that situation in most cases, necessarily. I guess it depends on how much more intimidating physically the person is. But
if it was a pigeon,
we just kind of nudge it with our foot or something.
I think so.
Let's see. Imps like this were mostly used for sensitive communications. He follows the imp, and he considers possibly befriending him over time, winning his confidence. Or I could just beat him up instead. This was a quicker and more direct approach, and all in all I favored it. So I followed the imp at a discreet distance and jumped him over Hampstead Heath. I love how he just lays it down. He takes the imp down, stands over him, takes the letters, and one is addressed to an R. Devereaux. The imp thinks Bartimaeus is stupid for not knowing who this is, and Bartimaeus sets him straight for his rudeness. And there's a footnote here. James, you want to read that?
Oh, it's lovely. So at that point in the narrative, there's just 3 stars. And the footnote says, these polite asterisks replace a short, censored episode characterized by bad language and some sadly necessary violence. When we pick up the story again, everything is as before, except that I am perspiring slightly, and the contrite imp is the model of cooperation.
Yes, and this works wonders on this poor imp who just starts laying it on thick.
Can I just sing the praises
please.
of an author who, rather than do what I think most writers would do, which is to write a paragraph detailing a skirmish with an imp, just does it as a footnote.
Yeah, he's like, this is just going to be a lot of punching and kicking and cursing. It's kind of like the Tasmanian devil swirling in
Very
the
much
dust.
like that. Yeah.
So Bartimaeus asks again, who's Devereaux? Turns out he's the Prime Minister. On the night I stole the amulet, I'd heard Lovelace being skeptical about the Prime Minister's abilities, and this gap in my knowledge suggested he was right. If Devereaux had been a prominent magician, chances are I would have heard his name. Word spreads quickly about the powerful ones, who are always the most trouble. So this is interesting, because of anybody you'd think demons would know the most about the relative skill levels of the magicians. So he's heard of Lovelace, even though he's been on ice for a while, but he hasn't heard of Devereaux. So I think maybe they gossip like in the demon space, maybe?
Yeah. Gossip and hearsay and maybe just, I don't know, does he read a newspaper? It feels like, again, we're not quite sure what he does between tasks.
Yeah.
Does he flit
Is
in
he
and out
reading
of...
Who's Who?
Maybe.
No, I'm just picturing the demon editor of like Who's Who and Asshole Magician Quarterly. He opens the letter all sneakily. He'll be able to reseal it later. And it's fairly prosaic about this upcoming event. And something about Amanda fixing up a room for the event. We figure that's probably the woman from Lovelace's house, because she was talking about fancying up a room somewhere.
Yes.
And then something about fresh lark's tongues. And I know this was like a Roman delicacy, but like the thought that people are eating those in 2020 whatever was shocking.
Oh, interesting. I think it is still a delicacy in China.
Interesting.
And I'm going to go one stage further and say that I think I've had one.
Wow. Interesting.
Because, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a lark's tongue. I used to work at a school which had fair number of foreign pupils, maybe like about a third of the pupils there came from overseas. And the chef had done a starter with lark's tongues because it had been requested. And although I found it an underwhelming culinary experience, I have to say, apparently the pupil in question was absolutely overwhelmed by how much it made him feel at home.
Oh, that's sweet.
Because it was a taste, it was a something that he completely associated with home. So it was the school's way of saying this is your home, which I thought was lovely.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm looking at some pictures of larks. Some of them have some great hairdos. One of them has kind of the Logan from Wolverine, you know?
I don't think you get.
Updos.
I mean, larks. Speaking as a lark, no, larks are attractive.
We'll call this segment Lark's Tongue.
They are pretty birds. You don't get a lot of that from the tongue, obviously, which is the thing that's ridiculous about eating any kind of. Yeah, but it's a bird's tongue is so tiny, and all you get, I mean, it's mostly bone as well. So all you get
Wow.
is a bit of greasy skin, basically, that which you eat off the bone.
Wow. It's like a tiny uh I had I'm just looking at these larks getting fascinated.
It's like a tiny chicken leg or
Anchovy?
so. No,
Chicken leg?
no, it's not. It's like chicken is the nearest equivalent I can think of because it's a bird. But imagine eating a chicken wing with no actual meat in it, just the skin. It was a bit
How
like that,
strange.
and
Wow.
very
Okay.
very tiny and very tiny. You'd need to eat like about 50 of them even to make up a decent starter.
Wow, they must go through larks. They're like sparrow sized, it looks like.
They're tiny, yeah.
Teeny guys. All right. Um so he thinks he should learn more about Amanda. Presumably that's Lovelace's girlfriend. He reads the next one and he gets excited to see that it is in code.
The tickets remain lost. We may have to cancel the performance. Please consider our options. We'll see you at P tonight. Now, this was more like it, much more suspicious. No addressee, no signature at the bottom, everything nice and vague. And like all the best secret messages, its true meaning was concealed. Or at least, it would have been for any human numbskull who chanced to read it. I, on the other hand, instantly saw through all the tripe about lost tickets. Lovelace was quietly discussing his missing amulet again.
That poor guy. He's all worked up. Bartimaeus asks him where he's going, and Imp says to Mr. Schuyler of Greenwich, who is Lovelace's former master. They're both ministers in the government. He asks the Imp about the conference they're organizing. The Imp doesn't know. He's thrown out all these fun descriptors to impress Bartimaeus. So I wrote down a few here. Oh, brilliant ray of starlight, most glorious person of high repute, he who is terrible and great. Like a good honorific. Bartimaeus asks who else the Imp often delivers messages to. Otherwise, no one stands out. They are mainly politicians and people of stature in London society. All magicians, of course, but they vary greatly. Only the other day, for instance, I carried messages to Tim Hildick, Minister for the Regions, to Sholto Pin of Pin's Accoutrements, and to and from Quentin Makepeace, the theatrical impresario. That is a typical cross-section. Pin's Accoutrements. What's that? So the Imp explains that Pin's is where all the best magicians get their gear, and Sholto Pin is the owner, and the Imp starts to run out of superlatives.
Interesting. So if a magician wanted to buy an artifact, he would go to Pins. Yes. What? I'm sorry, miraculous one. It's difficult to think of new titles for you when you ask short questions. Well, we'll let it pass this time. So, other than Shyla, no one stands out among all his contacts. You're sure? Yes, exalted being. He has many friends. I cannot single one out.
Oh, God, this poor Imp. He doesn't know who Amanda is. Then Bartimaeus asks who is the Beardo murderer, and also which servants does Lovelace employ that are more powerful than the Imp himself. The Imp is like, I don't go into the Master's sanctum. I haven't met his other servants. But Lovelace did just bring in 13 Krells, which must be the red things that Bartimaeus saw in the yard. He decides before going to the event at Parliament, he should visit Pin's accoutrements. He thinks about eating the Imp, but decides it would affect his ability to fly, so he lets it go.
It's quite funny, isn't it? Because Stroud makes it clear that Bartimaeus is demonic and would do something as gross as eating a fellow demon, but he never quite. We basically he wants us to like Bartimaeus, so he always finds a reason to kind of not actually go overboard in terms of what he's going to do.
Yeah, when you have an anti-hero, you kind of have to soften him a bit.
He seems to have a fairly, I wouldn't say a moral code, but he's got standards, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he's one of those professional villains that like there's no point in killing somebody if you don't need to because they or even beating them up because that'll cause you a lot more problems around the bend. So it's best just to be at worst neutral most of the time. He says, "Don't tell anyone about this meeting," and he lets him go. And then he flies to Piccadilly to check out pins. And this brings us to chapter 17. I got to get some water, so I'm going to run and do
Go for
that,
it.
if you don't mind. So, chapter 17, this is Pins Accoutrements. And I thought it sounded really fancy. It kind of reminded me of the wand store in Harry Potter.
Well, there are plenty of those in Piccadilly these days as well.
The places that are so expensive that like prices
No,
aren't listed or
no
they pull
wand
them out of
stores.
special boxes. Oh, I thought you just meant these fancy stores.
Well, actually, I mean, Piccadilly is pretty fancy. It's a yeah. How fancy is Piccadilly? It's not the fanciest. There are some streets off Piccadilly that Jermyn Street is known for its shops selling clothes, and some of them are very smart. But a lot of Piccadilly is slightly chain story, but still very, very overpriced. It's the kind of place that people going on spending sprees in London will hang out and spend much more money than they ought to on their stuff. And the Harry Potter shop thing is a phenomenon in London these days, where we used to get American candy stores. Now we seem to have just a plethora of Harry Potter style magic shops, and it's a fairly widely known, badly kept secret that it's just a front for money laundering, which London is the place to do it. But I guess if you're laundering money and you can sell some tourist a stick masquerading as a wand for 30 quid, it's a win-win, isn't it?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. You convert that cash. So Bartimaeus parks on a ledge across the street and he cases the place. Pins Accoutrements was the sort of shop that only the very rich or brave dare enter. Occupying an advantageous position at the corner of Duke Street and Piccadilly, it gave the impression that a palace of some kind had been dropped there by a gang of knackered gin and then been soldered onto the drabber buildings alongside. Its illuminated windows and fluted golden pillars stood out amongst the magicians' bookshops and the caviar and pâté houses that lined the wide gray boulevard. Even when seen from the air, its aura of refined elegance stood out almost a mile away. Each window was a monument to the pretension and vulgarity to which all magicians secretly aspired. Jeweled staves rotated on stands, giant magnifying glasses were trained on sparkling arrays of rings and bracelets. Automated mannequins jerked back and forth wearing swanky Italian suits with diamond pins in the lapels. On the pavement outside, ordinary magicians trudged along in their shabby work attire, gazed longingly at the displays, and went away dreaming of wealth and fame. There were very few non-magicians to be seen. It wasn't a commoner's part of town. Duke Street.
Well, so we are talking a part of Piccadilly, which definitely does not have any Harry Potter style magic shops. It's very, very upmarket, and it's not a place that normal people shop. So the descriptions here match reality absolutely. Duke Street itself is mostly kind of fine art stores and that sort of thing. And the sort of shops where they lock the door, where you actually have to ring the doorbell and be allowed in. The corner of Duke Street is where Fortnum Mason's is, which is this department store, which it basically is the real deal. The famous big department store in London is Harrods, and Harrods is famously owned by Mohammed Al Fayed, and I think it's quite vulgar. It's what people maybe who don't. This is going to sound snobbish, sorry, but it's like a person who has not grown up in rich surroundings thinks rich surroundings look like, because it's all gold and ostentatious statues, and everything about it is big. But as I say, I find it quite vulgar. Whereas Fortnum's, although it's hideously overpriced, is kind of genuine, and there's something magical about it. The window displays and it's so classy. And you can go in there, and I've certainly, if I'm feeling flush, I'll go in and buy a loaf of bread at Fortnum's, which is the best part of a month's salary. But it will be the best bread that you've ever tasted, because Fortnum's really do sell good stuff. And actually, because we were speaking about marmalade, Fortnum's will stock the winners. There's an annual marmalade contest in the UK, and the winners of the marmalade contest are sold in Fortnum's, and you can go in and pick up the best marmalade. It's that kind of shop, and every floor's a different treasure trove of whatever it is. There's a you go to the top floor in Fortnum's, which I have done to look. I must emphasize, to look and not buy, not even touch. But they've got music boxes, because if you've got more money than you know what to do with, you can get a music box, and these music boxes are £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 worth, and they're beautiful, and they're intricately designed, and some of them will have little clockwork things that go on while the music is playing. But it's still a music box. I mean, the limitation of a music box is it only plays one tune. I think some of them have sort of interchangeable things, but it's not like you're buying a CD player, is it? You're buying a music box. It's a very, very fancy thing to put on your mantelpiece, but they are beautiful.
Oh yeah, I remember my mom had a little one, like a normal person one. But yeah, I love when you catch him in a show, like in Westworld. Mr. Black, what's he called? The Man in Black. He has one on his dresser that is just gorgeous, and I wondered how much it cost. Thousands, apparently.
Expensive hobby. So yeah, Stroud is placing this magic shop in exactly the right place in London for where it would be in this alternate reality.
That's great. So he sees a very fat man on a stool inside. His servant is a foliot, a sort of dollar store genie. This guy has a gold monocle, which is probably his lens for seeing demons.
No doubt it was this that enabled him to observe his servant's true shape, since on the first plane the foliot wore the semblance of a youth to prevent startling non-magical passers-by. As humans went, Sholto looked to be a formidable fellow. For all his size, his movements were fluid and powerful, and his eyes were quick and piercing. Something told me he would be difficult to fool. So I abandoned my first plan of adopting a human disguise and trying to draw information out of him.
Yeah, this guy is intimidating. If Bartimaeus is careful around him, like he must have some juice. So at lunchtime, Pin dips out. He leaves the foliot alone in the store. Bartimaeus turns into a messenger imp, just like the one he beat up, and knocks on the door. So the foliot comes over. He says they're closed. And this guy, Bartimaeus, tells us he's a real fancy lad. You can tell he's one of the types that sucks up to their master. And then he just sort of shoulders in, and he's got this kind of chavvy style banter of the messenger imp he was dealing with before. Or at least that's how the guy reads it in the audiobook.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
That kind of not quite Cockney rhyming slang, but kind of a jaunty accent. Yeah. So this guy's like, "Don't touch anything. I could summon a Horla to whack you," which is some kind of monster. So Bartimaeus starts playing up to his vanity, saying he must be special to get to run the shop. And in his head, Bartimaeus tells us he's just disgusted by these types of guys. Most of us enact our duties only under sufferance, simply because we are hurt if we do not cooperate. But a few, typically ones in cushy jobs like Sholto's servant, grow to enjoy their servile status and no longer resent their situation. Often they do not even have to be summoned, but are happy to engage in prolonged work for their masters, heedless of the pain they suffer from being continually trapped in a physical body. The rest of us generally regard them with hatred and contempt.
I mean, there are humans like that as well, aren't there?
Oh, God. I call them class traitors behind their back. I don't want to call anybody out, so I'll say a shop steward in my company needs money or whatever, so he's turning into a supervisor. And I just kind of don't talk to him much anymore. And he hasn't even done it yet. He's just planning to. But I'm like, man, they'll tell their secrets to the man. They'll become the man. But some workers are like, let's suck up to him. Let's see where this goes. So I've seen that process develop many times. Can you think of the worst example you've ever come across?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure I want to go, but
Elon Musk.
I mean, Elon Musk.
To.
Elon Musk draws people like that to him, but everyone of that ilk does as well.
Yeah, and if you can pay enough, you can afford as much servility as is out there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before about the tawdry politics in the UK. Not quite so much at the moment, but certainly under the previous government, where the revolving door of whoever was in charge was spinning so fast. And honestly, the pathetic way that people with barely any reason to be in politics at all would cozy up and say the most nauseating things because they just thought their chance was with that, which was pathetic partly because it was like, it's so obvious what you're doing, but also pathetic because can't you see how fast leaders are coming in and out of this situation? And can't you see that the writing's on the wall for this dreadful government anyway? So what are you doing? You're demeaning yourself to this level for the sake of getting ever so slightly closer to the kind of the heat of power before it's snatched away from you anyway.
Oh, God. So Bartimaeus is like, I bet you're good at moving boxes and stuff.
The Foliot drew himself up. You cheeky fungus. The master values me for a great deal more than that. I'll have you know he refers to me in company, mark you, as his assistant. I mind the shop for him while he takes his lunch. I keep the accounts. I help research the items that are offered. I have many contacts. Hold on. The items. I gave a low whistle. You mean to say he lets you handle the merchandise, all his magical stuff, amulets and the like? Never. At this, the repellent creature actually simpered. He does indeed. Mr. Pin trusts me implicitly.
Ooh. My God. Oh, what a bastard. It sucks because the names we have for this type of person are so inflammatory and belong to certain communities, right? We've got the house slave and the Sonder commander. It's like, as white folks who probably shouldn't bring it up, but it's like it's so awful. In the labor movement, the people like that would join like American Legion or one of these other big like right-wing associated groups, and they just say all this fucked up stuff, even while their leaders are like the most corrupt, your Coolidge and Hoover and all these, maybe not Hoover, but people before that, and people in their government and stuff. It's just like, it's like an industry to suck up to the worst.
Yeah.
People.
And to suck up as publicly as possible and to try and build a career just on the 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 sad thing is, I mean, there are people who have successfully built careers basically on doing that. So it's not that it's not even that it's completely delusional, though it's pretty delusional. But the idea that if you suck up to someone enough, because our governments and our media are now full of these thin-skinned people who are intimidated by talent and desperate for
Mm.
adulation. It genuinely is a strategic career move to say the most absurdly toadying things to people.
Oh, that
But
makes
by
me
golly,
think of
I
the
mean, just
character from Gummy Bears named Toady. I don't know if you ever watched that show.
I had a conversation earlier about gummy bears. My other half had put it on for we were looking after a friend's daughter, and Gummy Bears was on, and they were both enjoying Gummy Bears. And I had to say, look, I never watched Gummy Bears. This means nothing to me.
Anyway, there's a little green ogre named Toady who
So
is just a
toadying
slime.
is toadying or brown nosing. Those would be
Mm-hmm.
terms that I would use for that kind of behavior.
Yeah. Or bootlicking. We say that a
Bootlicking,
lot over
yes.
here. Ugh. So Bartimaeus starts pumping him for info about the really powerful items. Weirdly, when the Foliot gets excited, he changes shape, puffing up as he puffs himself up.
Literally swelling, I mean, like a lime green balloon slowly inflated by a foot pump. Some foliots, the simple sort, change size and shape to express their mood.
The simple sort. He already called him like cut price gin. Now he's just making it worse. Foliot goes on about Nefertiti's ankle bracelet, which is supposed to make the wearer super hot, and Bartimaeus disabuses us of that notion. How wrong can you get? I brought the anklet to Nefertiti in the first place, and I might add that she was a stunner before she put it on. By the way, these modern magicians were mistaken. The anklet doesn't improve a woman's looks. It forces her husband to obey her every whim. I half wondered how the poor old Duke was getting on. Oh, my God. Well, I mean, there are some people, let's say, who will obey the every whim of someone that's hot, but in this case, it was the anklet itself. That would be a great thing to have. I mean, it's totally unethical, obviously, to use that against your partner, but it would be handy. Terrible, terrible. Oh, I don't want to wash these dishes. Bartimaeus drops the name of the Amulet of Samarkand, and the Foliot gets real suspicious.
This casual comment had struck some sort of nerve. The foliot's eyes narrowed and his tail gave a quiver. Who is your master, then? He said abruptly. And where's your message? I don't see you carrying any. Of course you don't. It's in here, ain't it? I tapped my head with a claw. As for my master, there ain't no secret about that. Simon Lovelace, the name. Perhaps you've seen him about?
God, that's a bold move.
Yeah, he's playing a shameless game, really, isn't he?
Yeah. Foliot's like, oh, you're new. Where's Niddles? And Bartimaeus says he got stippled. Some fun words here. Foliot
Yeah.
goes on to talk about how the amulet was stolen 6 months ago, and Bartimaeus responds that Lovelace said something bad happened, but not what. Well, he wouldn't speak to a spec like you, would he? Some people reckon it was the Resistance what did it, whatever that is, or a renegade magician. That's more likely, perhaps. I don't know. You'd think, with all the resources the state's got. So what did happen to the amulet? It got nicked, did it? It got stolen, yes, and there was murder involved too. Grisly. Dear me, it was most upsetting. Poor, poor Mr. Beecham. Bartimaeus is disgusted. The thought that a djinn would care about the death of any magician is just, ugh, despicable. Now this this is a dangerous area as well. But over here in America, in the U.S., there was a certain person that was killed on the street, and a whole lot of people on the left were like, "Oops, whoopsie." Don't be a billionaire, I guess, is the message. That was where we were coming from.
Yes,
Allegedly.
it was an interesting one. Well, yeah, it was a bit of sorry, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but it felt like there were people who were basically saying, "Well, he had it coming," which is not
Yeah.
a response I would want to make to anyone being murdered.
Yeah.
But I guess feelings are running high at the moment. That's yeah.
I mean, if enough of a revolutionary or just have loose lips, I guess you're willing to go there. But
I think I mean,
I'm not there yet.
as a fan of The Tale of Two Cities, one of the things that I think Dickens does so well in that book is he shows the ultimately the dehumanizing effect of grotesque levels of wealth and more than that, grotesque divide between those who have and those who don't have. And that's first manifested in the way that the poor people are perceived by the rich and powerful as less than human. That the death of a
Mm,
child, the accidental death of a child, is treated more like the death of a pet and responded to with kind of the tossing of a coin to make up for the loss. And then the converse situation, which seems so understandable in the context of that the revolutionaries, when the revolution happens, can no longer see the humanity in the people that they are putting to death, and it becomes this killing spree because
mm.
they have been so dehumanized themselves that they can't see their enemies as fellow human beings. So whilst I'm with you, I'm not there. There is part of me that sees the very problematic divide in today's society and worries that that's where we're headed. That certainly, I think we see examples um, of certain stratas of society being dehumanized, and
Yeah.
whenever a politician brushes off or a politician or a columnist brushes off the problems that people are having, whether it's mental health or whether it's work, and the breezy ways that they suggest that people should just stop drinking so many lattes or uh, stop complaining about how they feel and get back to work. That kind of just obnoxious dismissal of the way that people feel. Uh, that's the same thing, and so when it does happen the other way around, and when it's the left kind of shrugging and saying, "Well, he represented something that symbolizes a great deal of hardship for a huge number of people," I think it's immensely regretful that a human being has been dehumanized like that. But I can understand the context in which a human being has come to symbolize something else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Well, in the years leading up to the Revolutionary War over here, and I assume that's a somewhat similar process to other colonies, is that there was tarring and feathering. There was a whole lot of public shaming and embarrassment and danger, but out and out murder was much less likely because the king was so severe in terms of like punishing people who did that sort of stuff. But it just got so out of hand because there wasn't enough troops or police or whatever they had back then, garrisons, to like punish all these random tarrings and featherings, that like it eventually it led to the Tea Party and
Yeah.
the Boston Massacre and so on. But yeah, those stories are so just like, oh, and history rarely says, well, they killed 100 of ours and we killed one of theirs, like and for me as a pacifist, it's a very weird place to be in.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but yeah, the ratio of how many people get it, like the guy that got killed ran a company that has murder on its balance sheet. Essentially, it's 100%. A clear and present danger.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ugh. So, poor Mr. Beecham. This obviously was a different kind of crime. This is between upper class people. So Bartimaeus is excited to have learned that Loveland had Beecham murdered to steal the amulet and is involved in treason.
One thing was for sure, the boy Nathaniel had got himself into deep waters when he'd ordered me to pinch the amulet, far deeper than he knew. It stood to reason that Simon Lovelace would stop at nothing to get the thing back and silence anyone who knew that he'd had it in the first place.
Oh my God. So he stole it 6 months ago. He was sitting on it for, well, not that long, really, before Nathaniel swiped it. Maybe the murderer had it for a while. It's hard for me to tell, like, how long each chapter takes, but yeah, it's been 6 months. So Bartimaeus says the amulet must be incredibly powerful, and we know that because it was so easy for the enemy to find, for the cops or whatever to home in on it. The Foliot starts to get into it, but Sholto Pin rocks up. Bartimaeus plays it cool, while Simpkin, we learn his name, the Foliot, bows and scrapes. Pin asks if Bartimaeus is a friend, and Simpkin says no. So now, like, simp has become, like, part of the lexicon, the Elon Musk fan type of vibe, and here he is. Has that meant that for a while, or is that more of a modern thing?
Simp? How do you mean?
Well, it's a similar word for bootlicker. Yeah, origin of, I'm Googling.
I don't know.
Origin of the word simp. I know it's old, like it's probably from Shakespeare or whatever.
Yeah, it's got
more recently. Oh, it's a shortened version of simpleton.
Right. So
it was used in hip hop lyrics in the late 1980s and 90s. Now, bear in mind this is Google's AI, so
so it could be right, could just be AI bullshitting.
Yeah, it could go all the way back to Rome. There's no way of knowing. But yeah, this says early 20th century. Interesting. That's the Oxford. Listener, check in greatandsekretknowledge@gmail.com. Send us your treatise on the origins of the word simp. Not a friend? Sholto's voice was low, rich, and rumbling. It somehow made you think of sunlight shining on age-blackened wood, of jars of beeswax polish, and bottles of fine red port. It was a good-humored voice, seemingly always on the cusp of breaking into a throaty chuckle. A smile played on his thin, wide lips, but the eyes above were cold and hard. Close up, he was even larger than I expected, a great white wall of a man. With his fur coat on, he might have been mistaken, in bad light, for a mammoth's backside. Okay, Bartimaeus, that's just rude.
It paints a picture, though, doesn't it?
Oh, Bartimaeus is busting on humans once again. So Pin is like, what have you been talking about? I've been spying on you for minutes now. What's up? He pops on his monocle, and I think we already knew this, but Bartimaeus maybe is telling us for the first time. He gives us some info about the lenses.
With the aid of their lenses, magicians can see clearly onto the second and third planes, and blearily onto the fourth. Sholto was no doubt checking me out on these. Fortunately, my imp form extended to the fourth, so I was safe.
Excellent. So, now this is interesting because one could argue that a magician would ask his demon friends, who are presumably of a higher level, if they can see that the person they're talking to is a djinn. But I bet there's like a face kind of thing. Like, you don't want to admit to your demon friend, slave, or whatever, your servant, that you can't see what they see. I don't know. It
And a
seems like something.
confidence thing as well. I think that one of the things we're seeing is that anyone involved in magic is usually inflicted with an overinflated sense of their own abilities as well.
Totally. It even makes me wonder if they don't tell the humans that there's a fifth, sixth, and
Yeah,
seventh plane.
maybe.
So Pin asks Bartimaeus who the message is from. Bartimaeus says it's from Loveless. He asks what it is. Bartimaeus says some frivolous nonsense. I don't know if you have it there, but Pin's like, "What's your name?" He says Bodwin. And Pin's like, "Why did he bother with this with you when it's such an ordinary letter?" And Pin gets real close up.
In my current shape, I didn't half feel small. My other question is this. Why did Simon not ask my advice in person 15 minutes ago when I met him for a pre-arranged lunch? Time to leave.
And thus begins an epic battle.
It's big, isn't
Magic's,
it?
oh, so good. Magic's flying all around. Bartimaeus tries to bolt. Pin locks the door with this yellow light that icy spears shoot out of. Bartimaeus dodges them. He jumps over Pin's head, lands on the counter, and thus begins an epic runaround with Pin shooting magic. He's got a force field on. He's animating 2 mannequins with blades, etc. I gotta describe these mannequins. The mannequins turned round. They were made of dark, polished wood, the kind of shop dummy that has no human features, just a slender, smooth oval where the face should be. The barest suggestion of a nose, perhaps, but no mouth, no eyes. They were modeling the latest fashionable wizard gear, his and hers black suits with slim white pinstripes and razor-sharp lapels, lemon-white shirts with high, well-starched collars, daringly colorful ties. They wore no shoes. From each trouser leg projected only a simple nub of wood. As I leaped between them, their arms shot out to bar the way. From the depths of each sleeve, a silver blade extended and clicked into place in their fingerless hands. Ugh, so cool.
It's a great set piece, this, and he really goes to town with it as well. He gives us a full action sequence.
Hell yeah! So
With,
he
and
does
scary
get
and scary
poked.
mannequins, of course. It's a wonderful image.
It's like the Autons,
Exactly.
except instead of gun hands, they have blade hands. So Bartimaeus gets poked at one point. It's bad because
Silver hurts us badly. It burns our essence with its searing cold, which is why Sholto had installed it in his security system. What it did to the djinn imprisoned within the mannequins, I dread to think. That's grim, isn't it? The idea that these mannequins are controlled by imprisoned in a thing that's burning them the whole time. Yeah.
Oh, screaming like Mondasian Cybermen.
Yeah.
Ugh, terrible. So Bartimaeus hits one with an inferno, and even though it's on fire, it keeps going. The genie within was forced to obey its instruction, the defense of the shop, no matter what the consequence to itself. This was where I held a slight advantage, since my only current obligation was to save my skin. So the fire melts one mannequin. Sholto Pin is kind of recovering. He blasts his freezing shot at Bartimaeus, but it hits one of the mannequins, which destroys it as well. You got to feel bad for Sholto in this moment.
Sholto cursed, looked around wildly. He really didn't have to look far for little me. I was right above him, balanced on top of a freestanding set of shelves. The whole stack was filled with meticulously indexed files and beautifully arranged displays of shields, statuary, and antique boxes that had all no doubt been filched from their proper owners across the world. It must have been worth a fortune. I leaned my back against the wall, set my feet firmly on the shelf top, and pushed hard.
Oh my goodness. Now, I have to ask a weird question. They don't make anything of this here, but Are these magic items also encased, like, are there also demons trapped inside them?
It's hard to be specific, but except that we know from the description of the amulet that that is powered by a very powerful thing that's been trapped within it. So I'm guessing so, yeah.
So you probably can't break some of that stuff just
But
by
then
dropping it.
I mean, so Shield's statue. I mean, this what I'm picturing is the kind of thing that I would expect to see in a shop on Duke Street, which is something absurdly valuable.
So it's artsy, but it's not necessarily a magical thing.
Exactly, artsy and beautifully displayed. And I mean, there's it says a lot about me, but the most heartbreaking bit for me is the index files.
Oh my God, I didn't even think of it.
I just think, for someone who obsessively puts things in alphabetical order, to picture that
Simpkins
kind
is going to have to spend a week putting this stuff back. Oh no. Well, my original thought was like, if you could break all this stuff, would it be like a prison break?
maybe.
And all these spirits get to escape?
Yeah, I suspect that some of this is just superficial stuff.
Yeah. Apparently the crash was so loud, cars on the street slam on their brakes and hit each other. Bartimaeus flies for the hole in the window, and friggin' Simpkins stands in his way. And he's whining about the master being hurt. Bartimaeus is all, shut up, traitor. He turns into a falcon and blasts through the window. Yeah. Summoning the last of my remaining energy, I changed into the falcon. Simpkin didn't expect such a transformation from a humble messenger imp. He stumbled back. I shot over his head, depositing a farewell dropping on his scalp as I did so, and burst out at last into the freedom of the air. Upon which a net of silver threads descended, dragging me down against the Piccadilly pavement. Ugh, from high to low.
Yeah.
Now, canonically, this tells us that Bartimaeus can shit on command.
Yes.
It's not like he had to eat some berries or anything. Nope. He's just got it in the chamber. Now, if it was Odo from Deep Space Nine, would it be a part of him?
I was thinking exactly that thought. And do you know what I then thought? I thought, I don't want to think about this. And having let that sentence just pass me by without pondering the essence of the pigeon, the falcon shit, I'm a little bit resentful that you've made me talk about it. I think we should move on.
Let's say it's more like ectoplasm. It'll go away soon. So yeah, he's taken down. Big reversal. He tries to escape, but the silver prevents him from changing his form or using magic.
One of my eyes peeped out from under the crook of my wing. I looked beyond the deadly lattice of threads to the grey pavement, still wet after the last rain and thinly covered with a sprinkling of glass shards. And somewhere or other, I could hear Simpkin laughing, long and shrill.
Oh, that bastard. Son of a bitch. Someone comes over him, smelling of garlic and rosemary, and knocks him out. So what that made me think of was like maybe it's like chloroform made like soaked.
Yeah.
Because he passes out totally. That was scary. I was like, Bartimaeus, no.
It's such an epic chapter, and the imagery is all so perfect. We've reached a point where Nathaniel is in a lot of trouble and way out of his depth. And I feel like by going in and we feel the chapter starts and we think that Bartimaeus is going in undercover. By the end, he's basically smashed up an entire shop. This is not being handled in a way that is contained or manageable. They're both out of their depth now.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he didn't know these guys were straight up murderers, if he would have gone along with them, allowed himself to be captured. Or if he is like honor bound to avoid capture at all costs.
Well, the whole capture thing is an interesting one for reasons we shall come to. But I'm guessing that it's a mixture of having been given a task that he absolutely has to obey, but also self-preservation. He's going to want to go about the task in the least dangerous way for himself, given that we know
Yeah,
that the demons have died trying to carry out their commands.
totally. All right, chapter 18. We're back to Nathaniel. And this dude is wrecked. Barely surviving all that drama was intense for him. He gets a cold. And I got to say, chocolate sandwiches and a hot mug of honey and lemon sounds pretty awesome. I'm kind of thinking next time I go to the grocery store, I'll get some chocolate spread. Is that a thing?
Chocolate spread
Like I
is
know
a thing.
Nutella.
Yeah, but you can get a I think probably we're back in mango chutney territory. I'm going to launch into a thing I know nothing about with the voice of authority. I think probably most chocolate spreads do have an element of nut or something to, because pure chocolate on a sandwich would be too rich, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you got to cut it with
You've got to
something.
cut it with something, and a nut based thing would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Not a lot of stuff
All
in
I
dark
have,
chocolate.
the only chocolate I have on hand, since I ran out of, I don't keep a lot of candy in my house because I'll just eat all of it. It's semi-sweet chocolate chips that I ordered, and like I got way too many of them. There's like a
I
bunch of
don't like the
bags.
sound of semi-sweet. What does that mean?
It's for chocolate chip cookies where like there'll be some sugar in the dough itself, so they don't want the chips to be overpoweringly sweet. So it's like it's such a crappy snack. Like if I eat a few of those, it's fine on ice cream or something, but I try not to eat too much of that. So yeah.
The chocolate I like best is the the dark bitter stuff. So not milk chocolate, not sweet chocolate, but the proper stuff, the kind of 80% proof chocolate.
Oof.
That's from, and you only need a square of that to satisfy you. But I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
spread that on a sandwich.
God no. No, too much. So he gets that sandwich. Mrs. Underwood is suddenly wise to the weird smells and stuff that are in his room. He's like, smells rise to the top of the house. And she's like, yeah, I don't remember that happening. So before she sees the pentacle poking out from under his rug, he coughs to distract her. And he's just feeling very uneasy about the whole Bartimaeus situation.
Nathaniel did not feel quite secure. Try as he might to eject it from his mind, the anxiety came back. It was like a guilty conscience prodding him, reminding him, never letting him rest easy. Maybe he had forgotten something vital that the demon would spot. Maybe even now it was hatching its plan instead of spying on Lovelace as he had directed.
Forgotten something vital. Oh, man. So he thinks of using his scrying glass, but he knows he's too sick to risk it. On the third day, it's time to go to the big do. And, yeah, we get a little description. Who will be there? Nathaniel asked. He was sitting cross-legged in the corner of the kitchen, polishing his shoes. The 300 ministers of the government, their husbands and wives, some very lucky named apprentices, and a few hangers-on, the lesser magicians from the civil service or military who are close to being promoted, but don't yet know the right people. It's a good opportunity to see who's in and who's out, John, not to mention what everyone's wearing. So dresses aren't necessarily my thing, but I can imagine some readers might be just as interested as Mrs. Underwood.
How are you picturing the fashions in this alternate reality?
Well, most ministers, I imagine, are older people, generally 40 plus, so maybe a little more conservative than the normal, a younger group might wear. I don't think it's the Met Gala.
No, I'm picturing something quite old-fashioned because of there's been mention of pinstripe and collars, and I in my head, it's a slightly Tim Burton heightened fashion sense, and I'm imagining dresses that are of that world of just slightly exaggerate, archaic, but slightly over the top as well.
Oh, vintage. Okay. I like that. And then they got the jewels out, of course.
Yeah.
Shiny stuff. So she says Samarkand is trendy at the moment, and his ears perk up. He asks why, and she does not actually know. It's a weird data point. I don't know if it ever comes to anything, but it's a weird coincidence. Nathaniel is so pumped. He's pacing around in his nice clothes. He's going over the jagged pendulum incantation. And Underwood proves once again what a bad teacher he is. There you are, you idiot. I've been calling for you up and down the house. Another minute, and you'd have found us gone. Sorry, sir. I was reading... Not that book, you weren't, you dozy fool. It's 4th level, written in Coptic. You'd never have a hope. You were asleep, and don't deny it. Bite, snap to sharpish, or I really will leave you behind. Nathaniel's eyes had been closed at the moment his master walked in. He found it easier to memorize things that way. So this reminded me that Mr. Underwood has very little imagination. He's clearly not very good at deducing, hidden things, which is weird for a wizard.
Oh, but it's this is setting something up because Nathaniel is getting careless. He's quite openly there with a book that he shouldn't have, and he's relying on Underwood's incompetence. There's only so far you can go with your openly disobeying your master before it's going to go wrong.
Yeah. I've heard sharpish before, but I don't think I've read bite.
Oh,
other than it's a Star Wars character's last name.
In my copy, it's right.
Oh, okay. What do you call it?
Typo?
Typo, yes. So Nathaniel seems to have never seen a feather boa. He calls it a furry anaconda. It's only his second time in a car, and he doesn't remember the first time. The sheer scale of the city stuns him. There's so many commoners. And they drive by an inn, and Underwood is losing it. For some reason, he thinks all inns are hives of scum and villainy. He reminds me of those temperance people from the early 20th century.
Well, yeah. And again, we're getting back into kind of politics here, but there is a kind of hypocrisy surrounding a lot of the legislation, for example, around drugs in this country where, very commonly used drugs like cannabis are still publicly decried as a dreadful vice by ministers, whereas it was reported fairly recently that traces of cocaine have been found in all of the toilets in the House of Parliament, and so I think there's a double standard.
Those are just the interns, just those young crazy interns.
I'm sure. I'm obviously not alleging anything about the ministers themselves.
Does that mean they're doing it at work, or just that it's coming out of their system when they're at work?
Is that how traces of cocaine end up just sort of jettisoned?
In the water? Aren't they testing the water?
I don't know.
Or are they testing surfaces?
I think they were testing surfaces.
Oh, shit. Oh, they're...
Oh, mate, no.
Guys, don't do coke at work. It's not a great idea. I thought it was like a testing protocol,
I don't think they test the water. I don't think they test the toilet water for drugs, do they? No, I think they found...
Well, I don't know how they did this study, right?
Well, I don't know, and I should probably have checked my sources before. Oh, just...
We'll do that before
Google it and
episode.
See what AI makes up. I don't know.
Listeners, send us your Coke science information.
As I recall, so I don't want to perjure myself by saying anything inaccurate, but as I recall, the report had that there had been traces of drugs found, not in the water, but actually on surfaces in the Houses of Parliament. And it is a fact that certain ministers in certain previous governments had known drug use, though not necessarily at the time that they were ministers, but had a history of it. So,
Oh yeah.
so what all I'm saying here, I'm not throwing out any accusations out. I'm saying that there does seem to be a double standard in the treatment of drug use in this country. For example, because although the law is very down on drug use, even though, and I'm speaking mostly from hearsay here, but I think it is kind of known that drugs are used quite widely amongst people from all kinds of
You
backgrounds.
can get away with it. Like, you don't
can
have to
get
do
away
it on the street,
right?
or at clubs. You can just do it anywhere and get away with it.
But my understanding that when you reach a certain strata of society, more expensive drugs, and I would argue more concerning drugs in terms of the long-term effects,
Yes.
are as readily available, and possibly the blind eye that is turned to them is blinder on account of the class of people who are using it.
Yes, I will say the hypocrisy is very well noted. We see it a lot over here with pornography, that the right-wing bloviators often stay at hotels where all kinds of filthy porn is being ordered, and it goes up when they have their conventions. And, it's just a thing that people do. Like, people need to alter their consciousness.
Yeah.
So why are we making it so difficult? I don't know. And everybody gets off on different stuff. If you want your cocaine and you can moderate your usage, say, I don't know, don't do it at work. Whatever. But that's not how it is.
Well, I think I think that's the argument for legalization, isn't it? That actually it's safer if you can do it in a way that is legal and therefore supervised or controlled. And my understanding is that there are now places in Scotland that are open for you to be able to take drugs while supervised, with the hope of avoiding deaths as a result of drug taking.
That's really cool. Over here, they make it so hard to make meth that they lock up all their precursors, and it makes it epically annoying for everyone else, especially if I need Ritalin, but I don't currently take it because it's such a pain in the ass. They just, all because some people blew themselves up in a bathtub, or they just don't want poor people to have fun, or stay up 6 days in a row and build a sculpture on their front lawn. But, what's so different between us and them? I say us like I ever did that, but, it's just everybody likes different stuff. So Martha thinks he's overdoing it with his rhetoric. You don't know what you're talking about, Martha. Show me a London inn, and I'll show you a commoners' meeting house hidden inside. In the attic, in the cellar, in a secret room behind the bar. I've seen it all. Internal Affairs has raided them often enough. But there's never any evidence, and none of the goods we're after. Just empty rooms, a few chairs and tables. Take it from me. It's filthy dives and pits like that where all this trouble's starting.
That's it's a very Victorian attitude, though, isn't it? It's yeah.
It reminds me of the Doctor Who story, The Reign of Terror. Just things by that point were so polarized and so, like you said earlier, dehumanized, and you could just say that sentence right there, or that paragraph there, and people would die because of it. You know?
And to be honest, in the French Revolution, the taverns probably were where plots were hatched and things were.
Certainly a certain Mr. Adolf H. Did a lot of his organizing at the beer hall.
Early on, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Underwood thinks they should do more than spy on them. They should burn the inns to the ground. They pass into the wealthier part of town. Underwood tells Nathaniel a cautionary tale of Disraeli's apprentice, who shamed Disraeli by running into him and promptly got turned into a statue.
Right, so a statue. Yeah, so he's basically warning Nathaniel, don't
fuck up.
Don't mess up. Don't show me up. Yeah, yeah.
Or you get turned into a hat stand. This one kid got turned into a boot scraper. So Nathaniel figured you needed an Afrit to do the petrification spell, which is more powerful than a djinn or a genie, and thus Underwood couldn't possibly do that to him.
That's very funny. Immediately works out that his master's threat is just empty.
Oh man, there's no better way to lose respect from your subordinates than giving an empty threat. Or your kids, I assume. It's a similar dynamic.
Well, I don't dabble in empty threats. And one of the things you learn as a teacher is if you threaten something, you jolly well better be prepared to follow through.
Yes. And thusly, your threats can never be... it has to be stuff you're allowed to carry.
Yeah, of course. No, of course, you would be idiotic to threaten something ridiculous anyway. Yeah. I have known people who have done that and ended up digging a bigger hole for themselves to get out of. But but if you threaten something that's kind of this is as far as I'm prepared to go, so I'm going to threaten that. You only have to do it once.
Right.
Literally only once in your career, because then word of mouth, they say, no, Mr. Lark will do that.
Yeah, I'll send you home without your dinner.
I wouldn't threaten. That's a thing I wouldn't be allowed to do.
No, that caused a whole controversy. So, okay, this is wild. This is bizarre coincidence. But you see this T-shirt I'm wearing?
Yeah.
So this was for a fun podcast where they watch war movies. And one of the things they do on there I actually stole for the show, which is between series, we'll randomize what we're going to watch next. But anyway, they had a co-host who became called Bean Dad on the internet because he made a quick joke about how his daughter was annoying him talking about the can of beans, and so he wouldn't give her any beans. And people who had ever had food insecurity or were abused through food, just lost all respect for him, and it got really dark. And so these two guys that have another podcast I listen to, they were just like, that's it. It's over. Because he was one of those double down guys. You can't double down. Not these days. But yes, you're right. Don't use food to punish children.
No, I don't. I mean, where I'm a stickler on food is no, you've got a tiny amount of vegetable on your plate. You are going to eat that because that is going to make you live longer.
Yeah, it's sensible.
It's sensible, I think, to teach kids, even if they don't like the taste of something, if it is beneficial to them, it is a good habit to get into. I know adults who won't touch vegetables, and I don't imagine they're going to live for much longer. It's.
I'm trying to figure out that science. I'm sure I need to eat more. Let's see. So Underwood says to be quiet and not stare at anyone, even if they have deformities.
Sorry, I'm just worried now I'm going to become like Bean Dad because I said on a podcast that I make kids eat vegetables. Is this going to go down really badly with you?
No.
Am I going to be like
what you're talking about
vegetable teacher?
What you're talking about is called parenting or guardianship. No, what he was doing was joking about essentially corporal punishment with food that causes all sorts of future complexes. So yeah, Underwood says don't stare at anyone even if they have deformities. Seems polite enough, but that does mean Or does that mean some strong magicians mess themselves up at some point? Like they've been doing dark
Oh,
experiments and
that's totally what I got from it. Yeah.
cool. The writer doesn't lean into that.
No, it's left to the
In the
imagination.
past, they might have been like, "Oh, this guy has this gnarly scar and 3 arms," and ask. Oh, I'm supposed to ask you about the big granite monuments they see around. Are those a real thing?
If you go into the Houses of Parliament, there is quite a lot of statuary. Yes, I don't know
Gotcha.
about granite, but certainly monuments and statues are very much part of the experience of being a parliamentarian in the UK. Yeah, you're surrounded by history, ostentatiously surrounded by history.
Yeah, I believe in the gallery at U.S. Congress, there's a circular room full of painted statues or maybe wax figures, but they're like people from history.
Yeah.
With all their different costumes. I should know the names for the stuff. Uniforms? Yeah, a lot of them are military guys. Let's see. So he sees these crowds that I mentioned earlier that seem to resent the magicians. And there's gray uniformed people around. Those are the night police, presumably, keeping watch. And Nathaniel is just loving this shit.
Sitting by himself in the insulated comfort of the car, a glow of self-satisfaction began to steal over Nathaniel. He was part of things now. He was an insider on his way to Parliament at last. He was important, set apart from the rest, and it felt good. For the first time in his life, he knew the lazy exhilaration of easy power.
Whew.
The lazy exhilaration of easy power. That's a potent phrase, isn't it?
That is friggin' powerful. It's like we got this, commoners. We'll take it from here. Oh man. So they arrive at Westminster Hall, they head in, and Nathaniel is amazed. The walls and floors were made of giant smoothed blocks of stone. The windows were ornate arches filled with intricate stained glass. At the far end, a multitude of doors and windows opened onto a terrace overlooking the river. Yellow lanterns hung from the roof and projected from the walls on metal braziers. Perhaps 200 people already stood or strolled about the hall, but they were so engulfed by the great expanse it seemed the place was almost empty. Nathaniel swallowed hard. He felt himself reduced to sudden insignificance. I get the sense this is the biggest building he's ever been in, or biggest chamber.
Yeah, and the description matches Westminster Hall, the real one, and it's pretty huge.
Yeah.
And all of the arches and the stained glass. It's an impressive place. One of the criticisms that some level at the way that government works in this country is that it's perhaps not the healthiest thing for politicians to be put into that frame of mind, because it immediately confers on them a state of importance that perhaps is not what we want from the people who are actually meant to be serving us.
As a quasi-religious grandeur.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
See, where there you have one body of people that make important decisions, and then every so often one of them is positioned to be your political leader. We have that plus a queen shoved into one person that just everywhere they go is huge and like exciting and just monumental. It really gives them a big head, I think.
I'm not sure Donald Trump would want to be referred to as a queen, though.
God. I don't want to call him a king. Oh, God. Fearless leader. Let's move swiftly on. Nathaniel sees the statue of the boot scraper boy. There's a bunch of fancy magicians and their spouses filling the hall. He sees no magical entities anywhere in the hall. So I'm wondering if there's like a ban, if there's like a metal detector.
It's that certainly, again, it feels like a real life counterpart there.
Okay, yeah. So he sees that the apprentices are looking sharp. And he's like, shouldn't we talk to somebody? And Underwood's all, shut up. He sees some guy named Grigori who clearly isn't happy to see him. Meanwhile, Mrs. Underwood is happy to watch, comments on the surprisingly conservative styles this year. She points out Mr. Duval, the chief of police, and Jessica Whitwell, head of magical security, who is apparently quite powerful. And I think she is Arthur's boss, is that right?
Yeah.
Or she's in the hierarchy anyway.
Certainly kind of up there. I mean, above him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that ministerial positions work is that there's not an official hierarchy, except that there kind of is, and it's understood that, for example, the Home Secretary is more important than most of the other ministers. So you get the impression that Underwood he's on a ladder, but he's fairly lowly compared to things like head of magical security is going to be that's a big job.
And because we never hear of parties, we have to assume that it's a single party body. So he could never like rise to a higher rank because he's more influential and popular, right? He's kind of there because of his power level. So Mrs. Underwood sets Nathaniel's mind at ease, trying to get him to relax. The Duke and Duchess of Westminster rock up, and she starts dogging on this poor woman's looks, and then is startled to see Sholto pin. So, what did you make of her, like making fun or whatever of the Duchess of Westminster?
It's funny, isn't it? It's a moment of. It feels out of character, but it's a moment of character development, isn't it? Because we've only seen Mrs. Underwood in a context where we compare her to her husband, and she's obviously a much more sympathetic character. But it's interesting that she clearly also comes from this same world where she's going to look down on people, and there's an element of snobbishness about it, isn't there?
Yeah, it turns out she's human after all. She's startled because Sholto Pin looks all beat up. And Nathaniel starts to realize how truly low status Underwood is and how he himself is marked because he's his master. So thus his ambition is being thwarted on this, his very first outing.
He caught sight of his master again several times, always standing on the fringes of a group, always barely tolerated or ignored. Ever since the Loveless incident, he had known how ineffectual Underwood was. Here was yet more proof. All his colleagues knew the man was weak. Nathaniel ground his teeth with anger. To be the despised apprentice of a despised magician. This wasn't the start in life that he wanted or deserved.
Hell yeah, Nathaniel. Tell him. I mean,
yeah, but also Nathaniel jumped up little so-and-so.
Yes, he is a bit of an asshole already. So he's totally enamored by Rupert Devereux, the Prime Minister, and the whole crowd is getting excited. And then he notices Lovelace's two friends from the spanking incident. He moves in to try to hear what they're saying, and Lovelace arrives. He takes no champagne, goes right to his friends. And Nathaniel is like, ooh, I better listen in. So he hides behind a vase and starts listening. Turns out Lovelace has yet to find the amulet. The demons are no help. And he's like, maybe we should cancel. I could blame the girl, quote unquote. which either he's a total misogynist or she's not really his girlfriend. And he's just sort of using her in a way to get access to her big fancy house.
There's certainly a transactional element to this relationship. I think we've established already.
Yeah. So the old guy says Devereaux would be pissed if they canceled. So Lovelace is pretty worked up. He knows that whoever took the amulet is in this room watching and laughing, which is hilarious because Nathaniel's a few feet away from him. So Nathaniel skulks away to avoid being spotted. He knew he had to get Bartimaeus to learn more. He figures he's got to be there somewhere doing his investigation, and any one of the people there could be him in disguise. So that suggests that he knows that Bartimaeus could get past the demon detectors.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Maybe it can't be that Nathaniel is the only person that knows demons can get around that stuff. It's an interesting nebulous situation we're in here. Nathaniel finds some folks who are just totally bagging Lovelace, saying that his star is fading. And I can't tell if this is sour grapes or if this is actual fact. But some woman named Davina is taking another tack. She can't stop going on about how handsome he is. Mrs. Underwood finds Nathaniel and takes him to the back of the hall to listen to the PM's speech. And their spot just happens to be near the terrace doors that face the river. Have you seen that view?
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how far away from the river they really are.
Oh, it's right next to the river.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a terrace. It's where the Parliament bar actually opens up onto.
Nice.
You can see down from Westminster Bridge onto it, and the whole of the Houses of Parliament are run alongside the river. So if you're on that side of the building, any of the doors will open out onto the terrace, and then you've got a frighteningly low wall, and then the River Thames.
Wow. Okay. That's a cool place to set this little set piece. So there are now several hundred people in the hall. Prime Minister gives a brief report on their war with Czech. And is that how you say it? Do we have to say the Czech Republic? It's probably not a republic in this story.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I would, yes, we have to say the Czech Republic in our reality, but what does it actually say?
So I just called them
here?
Czech.
Yeah.
They're fighting in Antwerp, somewhere down south, near the Alps. Antwerp is in Belgium. Never mind. Let's see. He says some kind of icky stuff about commoners, but that's just normal shit. A number of magical artifacts have been reported stolen in the last few weeks alone. Now, we all know these are the actions of a handful of traitors, small-time ne'er-do-wells of no consequence. However, if we do not stamp it out, other commoners may follow their lead like the brainless cattle they are. We will therefore take draconian measures to halt this vandalism. All suspected subversives will be detained without trial. I feel sure that with this extra power, internal affairs will soon have the ringleaders safely in custody. Man, I felt kind of Hitler-y reading.
Yeah.
Whew. It's intoxicating.
It's certainly empire building. It's the kind of talk that it has a kind of historical ring to it rather than a contemporary one.
Yeah, definitely. Empire. It's got to be different living in a former empire to a current one.
Yeah, well, yes, and it's quite a divisive thing because obviously there are those who feel that the former empire is still something of a historical embarrassment and not a matter for particular pride. And there are those who feel that this once great empire could be great again, but we need to stop pussyfooting around the feelings of lesser people and take take our place on the national on the international stage again as people controllers.
Yes. Yes. If only we had someone to make this country as good as it used to
Yes.
be back in the 1700s or something. Nathaniel grows bored and starts looking around. He sees a man just outside the terrace door, and this man moves quickly. Nathaniel sees a flash of something magical.
The figure leapt through into the hall, a youth with wild, dark eyes. He wore black jeans, a black anorak. His face was smeared with some dark oil or paste. In his hands was a bright blue sphere, the size of a large grapefruit. It pulsated with light. Nathaniel could see tiny white objects swirling within it, round and round and round.
So this youth throws the sphere into the crowd. It arcs up and over, hits the ground. There's some tinkling of glass, and then an explosion. Whew, we did it.
It's a pretty thrilling. I mean, there's a lot. That's a lot, isn't it? It's remember I said that the shit was heading for the
Ooh,
fan.
yes.
I feel like the shit is now in the fan, and the fan is whirring away, and yet there's plenty more still to come.
Yeah, when you set off a grenade in the middle of a crowd, yeah, that's a big cliffhanger. I'm glad we got to it. Oh, man. If you're reading along, tell us what it's like to do so. greatandsecretknowledge@gmail.com. Overall thoughts on this section? I'm excited to see where this goes for sure.
I really admire the way he's juggling quite a lot of balls at the same time. Both the Nathaniel and Bartimaeus threads, although they're related, they're quite different because the stakes are quite different for each of those characters, and the personal stakes for Nathaniel have been raised to this really tense level, and then we've got the grand political scale of things, which has come to a head with this explosion, and it's the way that they are intertwined with each other so effortlessly. I think it's virtuoso writing.
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, it's why I can't not have so many damn quotes. Like,
Yeah.
It's just gorgeous prose, wonderful world building, pacing. He's either got an incredible editor or just is naturally gifted at pacing. Really, really good stuff here. Well, before we go into our plugs, what about recommendations? Anything you've want to share?
Well, so I went there and I watched The Substance. Have you enjoyed this yet?
I haven't. I'm way behind on films. I'm
Okay,
still
so The
catching up on
Substance.
things
Some
from
people
the
reckon
70s.
some people reckon that this was the best film of last year. I found it a very interesting watch. You have to be quite. It's going to depend on your tolerance for icky on-screen gore and things that you can't. I mean, I can't. I partly because I don't want to spoil it, but I can't describe some of the things that I saw in that film. Partly because I've just blanked them from my memory out of self-preservation.
Oh no.
It's a film that constantly dares you to kind of think, well, you can't go any further with that, can you? And then it's like, oh yes, we can. And you just sit there gasping with like, you went there, uh, and yet it's a film that's about something. So more than a kind of, I'd compare it to films like maybe the Cronenberg remake of The Fly. It's doing a lot with body horror, but much more than that film. It's really about something. It's about body image, and it's particularly about growing older from uh, a unflinchingly female perspective. And it deals with so many things within there about the way that women are portrayed, the way they are exploited, the expectations that people have, and the trauma of, in particular, building a career on the way that you look, and then seeing that ebb away because of something that is entirely natural, and the desperation that results from that. So I think it's an astonishing piece. I think you have to have quite a a stomach for tough things on screen to get through it, but it is worth it. And it's also funny. I mean, I did laugh out loud at a few points, and there are moments where you laugh because you're like, I can't believe I'm seeing this, but just down to the very final shot where you're like, okay, that is brilliant. Yeah, it's certainly one of the most memorable films I saw last year.
That's awesome. Well, I've been reading a lot of stuff for the show, which means I don't have a lot of fiction on my list. I've been listening back to the entire output of Who Back When, a Doctor Who podcast, and it's a lot of fun. For some reason, at a certain point, their episodes are only available on their website. Right? I don't know if they have a limit with their provider. So the newer ones are on the podcast catcher. But so, yeah, I've been going back and listening to those, and it's so great. But it's weird loving a show that isn't going back and forth with the listener, because like they're basically done except for if new stuff comes out. So for that, I love Adam Richard Has a Theory, with the delightful Adam Richard, the fabulous Adam Richard, because what's great about his show is he communicates with the listener. So there's like he's read some stuff I said, kind of like Hamster, and all the comments from their listeners and stuff. So I like that back and forth. There's just something great about being able to talk about Doctor Who in the moment with someone. You know, it's hard to do in your regular day-to-day life. I have a coworker that has all these Doctor Who stickers on his car, but I'm like, should I talk to him? Does he want to, what if he's one of those weird fans that is really conservative? That would be awkward. What if he hates the new stuff?
There needs to be a pin badge or something. A way of
What's
letting
the good ones.
I'm one of
See, it could go either way. It's tricky. Mm-hmm. Anti-racist Doctor Who fan? I don't know. It seems a little confronting.
How can you be a Doctor Who fan and a race? I don't understand how. I genuinely don't understand how anyone with.
Well, you might not necessarily be racist like, but you might not be you might not be like actively trying to make the world a better place. You know, you might find diversity annoying.
What? So who are you siding with when you watch Doctor Who? Are you
right?
Are you watching it and going, well, I hope the Daleks win this week because it's about time the good guys got one over on the Doctor.
This intransigent base commander, he's got some good ideas. Oh man, that Sir Charles, he's got his eye on yeah. Or Chin. Maybe it was Chin that I'm thinking of. But there's those ministers that are double dealing.
Yeah. Those
guys might be onto something. Who's the Invasion of the Dinosaurs guy?
Oh,
the swagger stick.
That's interesting though, isn't it? Because those villains are essentially left wing, or at least they're very. They're the Just Stop Oil of Doctor Who. They basically want to roll back time so that the Earth is clean again. It's just that they're going to kill everyone doing it.
I think I confused myself because the general is so
he's
conservative coded.
Absolutely. Conservative coded and the actually it's more complex than that, isn't it? Like the well-meaning do-gooders who think that they're in a spaceship to a new Earth. They're just
Those poor bastards.
idiots, and their whole agenda has been hijacked by. I guess. Right. I guess it's that thing where.
I think Malcolm Hulk knew some fifth columners or
Oh,
something.
I'm
Like,
sure. Yeah, yeah. And I think Malcolm Hulk is much less left wing than he's been portrayed as. But I think that there's a grain of truth there in what he writes, which is that basically every superficially left wing movement that gains traction has a right wing bastard at the head of it.
oh God. Oh God. That's basically the labor movement. Is we have these people that have been in leadership for years that are out of touch and would probably sell us out if the money was good enough.
Yep.
Well, on that hopeful note, Adam Richard has a theory. It's great. Listen to it. Yeah. Severance is back. It's so good. Ben Stiller, it turns out, is a really good director. And the director of episode 2 this season is less well known. I think it's Sam Richardson, but that's probably not right because that's the comedian who's in Section 31. That's my anti-recommendation for this month.
Oh.
It's like the first Star Trek that I might never see again. It's that subpar. A lot of cool images and stuff in it, but it's not something I'll tell you to rush out and go see. I wouldn't tell you to sign up for Paramount Plus to see it, but do that and watch Voyager or, one of those other things. There's plenty of Star Trek to go around. All right. So yeah, Severance, Adam Richard. Yeah, I think that'll do it. Anything you've got going on people should check out?
Oh, well, when's this going to go out?
Oh God, that is a good question. I have vacation starting soon, so I'll have time to knock them out. Let's say 2 weeks, but then I have the Doctor Who convention from the 13th through the 18th, so we'll see how that goes. I can edit down there, we'll see. 2 or 3 weeks.
Let me put it this way: my podcast, Neurotic Literature, which is quirky and dark, strange, profound short stories, is a new series is due, and it will be hitting the interweb at some point over the next month or two. So either you will find new episodes hitting fairly soon, or you might just want to take this opportunity to recap on the old episodes if you haven't already. So that's Neurotic Literature.
Okay, so that's what I'll be doing on my vacation instead of editing. So your episode might come out a couple months. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's really cool. That's a big achievement when you have a season kind of, I don't know. I think that's great. I did that for a show for a while called The War for the Tower, which you can't get anywhere anymore because I stopped paying the hosting fees. Yeah, we'll get into that some other time on the Great and Secret Knowledge. Thank you for listening. Thank you, James, for just putting your brilliance on display. It's one of the best things about my month. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you again for having me, and look forward to the next one.
Of course. And now I get to go talk about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from 1990. So check that out, listener.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, and I did an interview with a good friend of DeForest Kelley, who wrote a book. That'll come out soon. And our Lower Decks coverage with the Duras Sisters podcast. And also got some great things happening over on my other show, Shattered Worlds RPG. So check that out. Thank you, everyone. James, thank you for taking so much longer than we scheduled. You're great. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. And have a fantastic time at the Doctor Who convention. That sounds brilliant.
Oh, Gallifrey one, yes. Oh, so good. My first convention.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, look, have a great time.
I'm sure I will. Yeah. What could go wrong?
Look forward to hearing all
Don't tell
about
me.
it.
Don't tell me what
I'm
could
not,
go wrong.
I don't know. Well, there are a lot of answers to that.
A huge thanks to James Lark of jameslark.co.uk for providing our wonderful theme song. Thank you, James.
You're sounding like you might be down on the doctor's daughter.
I think the Doctor's Daughter is a low point. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
Is it one of your favorites? Go on then, explain that. Explain yourself.
It's so shallow. I'm a blonde person, so I identify with blonde characters. And then she's so beautiful and spunky. And she's like got a little bit of Tennant in her, which I love. Just enough that you feel like they spent a couple hours talking to each other or whatever. And she kind of got his vibe. But not so much that she watched 4 years of Doctor Who to prepare. But yeah, I there's a few things I don't like how it's only been 7 days and not even the old guy can remember why the war started.
It's partly just it feels like two things. It feels like a filler episode because clearly they've not spent a lot of money on those sets. It's a pretty kind of basic setup and not an attractively designed episode. But it also feels like it's a weird pilot for a series that never happened.
For Jenny.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I'll watch that show. I listen to all the big finishes. I'm telling you, I love her. She's great.
I like that your first bar for measuring the success of an episode is how blonde it is. So
it's
anything
not,
involving...
No. I love The Beast Below. I love The 11th Hour.
Yeah, but anything involving Thals.
Oh my
blonde
God.
characters and...
I do like the Daleks. But I hate the one with the ice volcano, and there's tons of Thals in there.
There's a lot of Thals in that one, yeah. Yeah.
What's that one called? Death to the Daleks?
Planet of the Daleks.
Planet.
I've got quite fond memories of that one because that was one that was repeated on television in 1994 or 5. It was when I was a teenager at school.
Oh,
and
nice.
Doctor Who was like any shot of Doctor Who was to be savoured. And so when they repeated a fair few Pertwees, weirdly, and that was one of them. So yeah, kind of happy memories of watching that after school.
That's great. I thought the way they handled bombs was a little odd. The Daleks would just set them for a long time and then walk away.
That's very Terry Nation, though, isn't it?
Very. This will be fine. I don't need to keep an eye on these. All right. Well, I could talk all day about the Doctor's daughter. But,
okay. Well, I'd love.
Probably we shouldn't.
I should go back to it. I should go back to it. I should give it another go because she's very. I like her.
Oh, I also love that Martha's in it.
I think that. I mean, that was another thing that was really pissing me off about that. That how many leaving scenes do you want to give a companion? Martha gets one at the end of her first season. Then she comes back. She gets a leaving scene at the end of the Sontaran story. And then she doesn't leave. She gets to do another leaving scene the next week.
Yeah. Yeah, and then she comes back for a brief, really weird scene at the end where the Doctor's just like peeping on her and Mickey.
Russell T Davies. He loves the soap opera of the situation, and we know that he loves goodbyes. We know that because David Tennant's Doctor takes a whole hour to die.
6 episodes
in which he goes to say goodbye to everyone. So I just think he's so in love with writing farewell scenes that And I think he probably thought it was a really clever idea. I'm going to trick them. They think Martha's leaving. But instead, you're just like, why did we go through all of that emotional stuff when you were going to go with him anyway?